and in Lubbock, which is a lousy place. Welcome to another edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics, brought to you by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. Good evening. I'm your host, Buford Terrell. We have a full table tonight and a lot to talk about. So I think I'll just start with Clayton and let everybody introduce themselves tonight.
I'm Clay Jones. I'm with Drug Policy of Texas. I'm with NORML. I believe in what LEAP does. That's probably everything I'm part of.
Okay.
All right. I'm Dean Becker. I produce radio programs for KPFT here in Houston. 90.1 FM airs Sundays at 6:30. We talk about the drug war on a consistent basis. I'm also a former cop, a member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, member of NORML, and on the board of the the Drug Policy Forum of Texas.
Okay. And to my left, our guest.
My name is Paul Kubosh. I'm an attorney here in Houston.
Okay. We've got a lot to talk about tonight, but we need to start probably with some national news with local roots to it. It's something that happened to a Houston boy who has made good. Nearly 30 years ago now, Richard was working as a technician with the Aerosmith band. There was an accident at one of the shows. He fell from the rigging, had a severe back injury, and has been in a wheelchair ever since. Around 1990 or so, Richard opened a small shop down in the Montrose, selling primarily hemp clothing. In 1996, California passed Proposition 19, legalizing at the state level use of marijuana for medical purposes. Richard packed up the truck and moved to Oakland. He became very active in the medical marijuana community, was one of the leading distributors. He founded Oaksterdam University, which for many years now has been the leading trade school, teaching people how to run a dispensary, how to grow marijuana, a lot of the culture and everything else concerning medical marijuana, and has been a leader in political movements fighting the marijuana laws. About a week ago, the U.S. government came down hard on Richard. They raided his home, his businesses, the school. They confiscated a lot of his property. They're threatening him with massive tax bills. He's looking at multiple major delivery charges, conspiracy to violate the marijuana laws. They're looking at confiscation of a lot of his assets. And Dean, you've talked more extensively to Richard than I have. You want to fill in some details?
I talked to him last Friday. He seemed, I won't say upbeat, but tolerating the situation. He was happy they didn't arrest him. They just detained him and let him go. He is now stepping down as president of the Oaksterdam University. And by the way, I'm wearing one of Oaksterdam's shirts today in his honor. They took his bank accounts. They busted his nursery, which was perhaps the world's largest clone nursery, if you will. They took all these mother plants, hacked them down, which was probably half of the genetic code of many of the various strains here in the United States. But he says he's going to work more as an activist, not be tied down, if you will, by his businesses. He's going to help the people in Washington State and Colorado in their efforts to legalize marijuana this coming fall in that election. And in general, it's not something that he didn't expect.
Right.
He knew this day was coming, and he took it in stride as much as any person can, I would think.
From what he and I exchanged over the weekend, I'd say that he's first pretty upbeat, and second pretty much aggressive, that he wants to take the fight to the government on this.
Well, if I may put in here, this past, what was it, Friday?
Yeah.
Houston Chronicle had a couple of letters to the editor in response to an opinion piece by Bill King.
Right.
The editorial was questioned to end the drug war.
Yeah.
And he had a great presentation in that it is time to reinvestigate, reevaluate what we're doing with this drug war. And in that, in those letters to the editor that came back, one was the former director of the Houston's high-intensity drug trafficking areas named Stan First. And basically he just talked about all of the, I don't know, commitment he had, all the time he had lost, how it impacted his family. It was almost as if he wanted a statue built. But my response can be summed up with these few words, and that is this: considering the corruption of the drug war, which includes empowering our terrorist enemies, enriching the barbarous Latin cartels, and enticing more than 30,000 violent gangs to prowl our neighborhoods selling contaminated drugs to our children, I ask, what is the benefit? What have we derived from this policy that offsets this horrible blowback? And of course, there is no answer to that. I don't think we'll ever get any elected official to address that unless we're just dang lucky.
Well, I've read his letter and yours that was printed as well, read Bill King's column. And this is the thing. The war against drugs has been going on for 100 years, practically, since 1914.
They talk about 40 years, but it's much, much longer.
We have more opiate addicts today on a per capita basis than we had then. We have half the adult population who has at least tried marijuana. We have not been able to wipe out cocaine. The stimulants like methamphetamine are at a level now about the same as when they were the real problem prescription drug in the 1960s. What we've done is rounded up over 2 million people to lock in prison. We've spent well over $1 trillion in that 40 years.
Well over these days.
And basically what we've done is we've killed a bunch of people, put a bunch of people in prisons. We've had a bunch of people die because they were getting junk drugs instead of the pure stuff from the pharmacy. And we haven't cut down one little bit on drug use or drug abuse. We have simply made it profitable to be a bootlegger. So,
same as it always was. Yeah.
Well,
and let's don't forget, though, Buford, the fact of the matter is that, as I indicated here, the terrorists, the cartels, and the gangs have reaped more than $11 trillion in that black market.
It's more than that, though.
Well, it's an enormous amount.
The best figures I have seen, and the problem is, since we're dealing with an illegal market, there are no statistics that you can rely upon for anything. But the best numbers I can come up with are that the American drug laws are sending about $60 billion a year to the Mexican cartels. And of that, somewhere under 10% actually goes for the cost of preparing and moving the drugs. The rest of it's either premium caused by illegality, payoffs to corrupt law enforcement officials on both sides of the borders, or just the higher risk premium because you may go to jail for 20 years for being in the business.
That's it.
Yeah.
I was in El Paso 2 years ago attending a conference. Anthony Placido, he was then assistant head of the Drug Enforcement Administration, gave a speech. And contained in that speech was the thought that,
You want to?
well,
okay.
let me finish this. Contained in his speech was the thought that each year the profit in the black market in drugs is $385 billion a year. And again, it's nebulous. Who knows exactly? Do we have a call?
I think so.
Okay. Speaker, you're on the air. Hello? Are you there?
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Oh, well, I was listening to this program that y'all have on, and
Please
I
turn
think
down
that,
your TV.
Marijuana should be. Oh, wait a minute. Pardon me. I was too close to the TV.
Okay.
So hold on, let me get back.
Okay.
That's something that should be used like it should be sold like in liquor stores or something like that. You know, where teenagers and kids and stuff don't have ready access to it, and
I believe Washington State's trying to do something like that.
There's so much. I mean, it's stupid for them to be making laws where they're throwing everybody in jail for it. I just don't understand why they do that to.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You know, I don't understand why either, but they did.
This comes right back to him.
Yeah.
Out in the West Coast, everywhere that they've got marijuana, it's been through a ballot initiative. And you're the one that's got the ballot initiative here in Harris County that everybody loved.
Yes.
No, everybody didn't love it, but go ahead.
A majority of people loved it. So are you asking me what it would take here in
Yes.
In Texas, you do not have a right under state law to do an initiative or a referendum.
Yeah, it's only in about I think 19 states that have
So in Texas, you would have to get the legislature to either give you the right to do that, to petition the state government, and you could not go to a city to legalize, like City of Houston could not legalize marijuana because it would be in conflict with state law. So that would be a problem.
Well,
it would be hard to do.
Is there something we can do on a county-wide basis?
Not to legalize marijuana.
Well, no, but to talk to or instruct our elected officials.
Well, you would have to convince the ruling party, which would be the Republicans, that they should legalize marijuana. And then they would have to either you could convince them that maybe we should have the right to organize or to do ballot initiatives, and therefore you could tell them, hey, look, you know, you may not agree with my position, but you should agree that people have the right to petition their government, which is something that I agree with. You and I could agree, without even talking about marijuana, you and I can agree that people are to have the right to petition their government, and we ought to be able to go straight to the state and tell the state legislature, we want this law, because the state legislature is controlled not by the public, but by their puppeteers, their people who donate to them. Because I've gone up to the state house, I give tons of money to the state reps, and I go up to the state house, I appear in a committee, and they act like they don't know me.
They don't.
So whether or not I agree with you or not on marijuana or on drugs, I do agree that you ought to have the right. If you can get everybody to agree with you to legalize marijuana, you ought to have the right to put that on the ballot. And do not be afraid of the public's vote. Do not be afraid of the people.
Well, I'm one of the ones that's firmly opposed to ballot-making legislation. There are too many things where I think the rights of the individual need to be protected. I'd hate to think what would happen if, say, civil rights had been put to a popular vote in Mississippi in the 1960s. But I do know that...
Now understand, in the 60s, there's one thing to pass a law, it's another thing to change the Constitution. Because all those civil rights laws stem from the Constitution.
That's because the federal government was there to step in.
Well, that's true.
Okay. But I do know that right now, using local initiative powers, there have been states across the country that, without violating the state law, have passed local ordinances mandating that enforcement of marijuana laws is the lowest local law enforcement priority, even saying below jaywalking. There have been others where referenda have mandated that city council send a memorandum or a petition to either the state legislature or to the state congressional delegation requesting that the state change the marijuana laws. Would either of those kinds of local referenda be possible in Texas?
Well, definitely you could, you could propose anything you wanted to the city government, some type of ordinance, and they could pass it, and the city may or may not follow it. Because the mayor and city council does not have to follow a local ordinance.
Okay.
You would have to make them.
Okay. We need to take a break. We'll be back in a few minutes.
So we really don't.
The whole idea of a drug-free America and zero tolerance really doesn't make much sense, does it? So it does make sense, however, to find ways to reduce the harms associated with drugs. And that's what I want to talk about.
Start thinking about whether it is really laws that make the difference on whether people use drugs or not.
Al Capone didn't shoot people because he was intoxicated.
Right, exactly.
Those people are not fighting over drugs, they're fighting over money.
Drug laws have no basis in science. Drug laws are based on politics and money.
So there's this unholy symbiosis between, on the one hand, those who are selling illegal drugs, the drug lords, if you will, and on the other side, the drug warriors.
War on drugs isn't working, and that, if anything, it's just making what we call the drug problem a lot worse.
Oh, we're back on Drugs, Crime, and Politics. We've been talking about whether there might be any potentials for a local referendum dealing with marijuana somehow, and you have at least pushed through one successful referendum, haven't you?
Yes, I did.
Mm-hmm. Was it easy? Was it hard?
It was extremely difficult getting it on the ballot, but winning it, there was enough people who not to, I know you have a different opinion, but there was enough people who saw it the way I did that, cameras had never lost a public vote anywhere in the country. Every time they've been put up to a public vote, whether or not it was College Station, anywhere else across the country, cameras always lost. And so we knew we'd win once we got on the ballot.
Mm-hmm. Well, what does it take to get an issue on the ballot?
You would need at least 20,000 signatures from registered voters.
Okay.
And then you would have to take them to the city secretary.
Yeah.
You would obviously pre-check your voters, to your list, to make sure the voters were actually City of Houston residents who were registered to vote. City secretary would then have her staff go over the signatures, and then it would be up to the mayor and city council whether or not she put it on the agenda. She may or may not put it on the agenda. She doesn't have to. If she does, well, I believe the state law says she does, but I do know that there are other municipalities who have refused to put charter amendments on the ballot. Then you would have to be prepared to go to court to mandamus her to put them on the ballot.
Well, if there's one thing that Houston's got, it's lots of lawyers.
Yes, they do.
Well, and you know, the focus of any of these referendums that we may put forward is going to center around marijuana and the right of adults to be a little more free in the use of the product. And Buford mentioned 50% of Americans have smoked pot. Houston has a population over 2 million. There's 1 million pot smokers in the city of Houston. And the fact of the matter is that there's at least 100,000 that smoke on a daily basis. I think we can get to 20,000 cigarettes.
Well, and maybe you can.
It's not that easy.
But you know, one of the things that you'd have to remember is that if you put together a charter amendment that tries to legalize the illegal act.
No, not legalize. Just change the way they deal with it. Treat it more like alcohol. Put it as the lowest law enforcement, you know, goal.
Do you mean instruct your law enforcement to follow the state law and instead of arresting, write tickets?
Yes, yes.
We could do that.
So, you know, that would be something like that would be, but, you know, in my opinion, to get something to pass, you know, you're going to have a hard time with the concept unless you focus on the pocketbook. You know, jail overcrowding.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you don't need the jail full of people with marijuana, even though, you know, I may disagree with you on the status of marijuana, legal or not. You know, do you really need to lock them up? Well, you know, that's debatable. You know, and it's not I don't think it's a slam dunk when you could write a ticket and bring them into court. So if you just want to spank their hand, because really the Class B misdemeanor on a marijuana charge, a lot of times it's reduced to drug paraphernalia, which is nothing more than a slap on the hand.
Well, the problem there, and this is why the state law needs to be changed, is that with the arrest system we have now, even though when the case gets to trial, the person pleads guilty and gets the slap on the wrist, pre-trial, he's already been sitting in jail long enough so that he's lost his job, probably lost his health insurance, maybe been kicked out of his apartment. And that's a pretty stiff penalty for a Class B misdemeanor.
You know, I agree. Depends on who's arrested. I don't smoke marijuana, but if they arrested me, I have no criminal background. I'm not going to be in jail longer than 48 hours.
Probably not that long, because you can probably write a check to cover the bail bond.
Even if I couldn't, I'd probably get a pretrial release bond from pretrial services. But the people who stay in the longer amount of time is the people with the long arrest record. If you've got 3 felonies, 4 misdemeanors, you pick up another marijuana charge, well, they're not going to let you out.
No.
Well, I've got a friend that spent a week at Harris County, never had a prior conviction, and he spent a week before he could get the bond together.
Had he had any prior arrests?
None.
Well, then obviously it's not a fast and hard rule. I would almost be interested in seeing the paperwork. But I mean, I'm not doubting what you say, but it's not a hard and fast rule. All I can tell you is from watching how my brother has a bonding company, and from watching how when people get arrested and how fast they come out, I'm basing my opinion on watching that over the years.
I know a few years back there was all this talk about jail overcrowding. They're loading up buses full of prisoners and they're sending them to Louisiana and other facilities. Are they still doing that?
No, they actually, the current sheriff and the current DA have done a pretty good job of cutting some of the jail overcrowding down.
And you know, that's from, depending on where you're at on the issue, the not taking the trace amounts on the cocaine charges from the crack pipes
has made a big difference, yeah.
Has made a big difference. And depending where you fall, you know, academically, you know, as a defense attorney, I don't think it's fair that you charge my client with possession of drugs when there's no drugs for me to test to see if there was actually cocaine or not.
Yeah.
Okay, because, you know, they can't test it, because once they test it in the field, it's all gone. Yeah. So we just have to take the officer's word, you know, on it. And, you know, but then you put on your other police hat, then the other way, you know, if you got a crack addict who is going to go rob people, that don't solve the problem, because you got to let them out.
No. Wait a minute. You're getting my defense lawyer's higher up.
Come on.
Being a crack addict is not and cannot be a crime. In the 1960s, the Supreme Court said you may not make someone's status a crime. It's not a crime to be an addict. It's not a crime to be a drunk. It's not a crime to be a vagrant. It's not even a crime to be a prostitute. It may be a crime to receive money for a sexual act, but the status of being a prostitute is not a crime.
Isn't that what our laws have done, though? Criminalize the addict?
Now, that's what I'm saying, is that you just talked about the policeman that sees someone that's a crack addict who might commit a property crime. You're not telling me he possesses crack. You're not telling me at any particular time that he has possessed crack or what amount. And you are not telling me that he has committed a property crime. So you're saying the police are arresting him for his status, not his behavior.
Here's what the officers are telling me. When we're in court. Yeah. They're saying, look, Paul, this is why we have to arrest people for trace amounts. I pull the guy over, I do the test, it's a trace amount. That's a felony. I'm going to take him in. I shake him down. And he rolls other people.
Okay, that's the other point I'm making. That's improper police work.
Well, I kind of agree.
They should learn how to do their own investigation and not bully and blackmail someone else into doing it for them.
But is that illegal? Let me ask you that. Is that illegal?
It should be.
There has been too many instances of police officers finding some youngster with a bag of weed and saying, look, we'll let you off the charges if you'll take us to the next level up, if you'll set up a buy with the people who sold it to you.
And across the country, how many of those teenagers
wind up dead in
have been killed or shot in the course of that setup?
Yes.
It got so bad that Florida actually passed a law prohibiting it with minors.
Yes, yeah. Chappelle was the girl's name down there.
Police, if they do their job correctly, do not need coerced informers. And in the first place, how the hell could any member of a jury ever believe the word of anyone who had sold his testimony in return for getting the charges reduced against him? That's suborning perjury any way you look at it.
Well, I mean, first of all, aren't all informants by the very nature coerced? And
that's precisely why they should be done away with.
Well, and secondly, if you don't have an informant, how do you break into the organized crime?
You don't. You catch them when they have committed a crime and you lock them up for what they have done, and you discover who they are by proper investigative work. Secret police are secret police, whether you call them Gestapo
Stasi
or anti-gang operations.
This is part of it, Buford, is that in the name of the drug war, we have slowly whittled away at our civil and human rights. Right. We have given carte blanche to law enforcement to do whatever they can, whatever they need to.
Several years ago, Congress passed a law that said no federal court could accept testimony from any witness who had been given anything of value for his testimony. The 10th Circuit Court of Appeals overturned a conviction where the police had given an farmer a deal for reduced sentence in return for testimony. The 10th Circuit in Bach reversed that, reinstated the conviction, and said, we see the words in the statute, but we can't believe that Congress really meant to overturn something as long-standing and widely used as paid informant testimony. We've got to take another break.
What was the fire baptism as discussed by John the Baptist? What was the importance of the fire baptism? Is it currently illegal to perform the fire baptism? Is the holy oil described in Exodus illegal to manufacture today?
It is currently illegal to conduct the fire baptism of Jesus Christ.
In the earliest translations, from the Hebrew into the Greek, in the Septuagint, it was mistranslated as calamus, and then subsequent translations ever since then have not gone back to the Hebrew, but have gone, in fact, to the Greek and have propagated this misconception that calamus is the plant that was used in this anointing oil of the priest.
This is the seal of the gift of the Holy Spirit, and for us that means that the Holy Spirit, which has been already granted in some form during the baptism, is now sealed. And that means that this person has the right and the responsibility to move forward as a Christian for the rest of his life.
In the tabernacle, where you spoke with God, everything was anointed with this oil, which contained cannabis amongst other things. And in the ordination of the priest was anointed with the oil.
In Exodus 30:23, God commands Moses to make a holy anointing oil with anywhere from 6 to 9 pounds of cannabis mixed into about 6 liters of olive oil, along with myrrh, cinnamon, some other spices. And every time that Moses is to talk to God, he's to cover himself in this anointing oil, place some of this anointing oil on the incense altar with the incense.
Of course, there is the clear relationship between the word chrism itself and Christ, both meaning one who is anointed. And the follower of Christ is united with Christ in a very deep and profound way. And we definitely understand this chrismation to be an important feature of that being united with Christ.
Got PR. Welcome back to Drugs, Crime, and Politics. We're having a delightful chat with one of the good lawyers of the city who has led the way in submitting petitions to get changes in city government.
Well, specifically to get rid of those dang red light cameras, right?
Yeah, and I just can't believe you're not with me on that. Government overreaching?
No, that's not overreaching.
Okay, well, I know we're not here to debate that.
That camera is sitting out there in plain sight. It's got a big sign on it saying it's here. And I have been driving in this city too long and seen too damn many people crowding the lights and speeding up to go through as it changes. Frankly, that's one where I think that the cameras would have done some good, and we should have kept them working.
Well, since we've settled that issue,
yeah,
I'm going to tell you I appreciate your opinion.
Okay. And we saw how good my opinion was as far as the city was concerned.
I think you were
now,
1 against 3.
I don't think we want to go to where Britain is gone.
Well, you mean
with surveillance cameras everywhere?
Well, let me tell you about the city of Houston. I was at a hearing, Melissa Noriega's hearing, and there was a federal grant, part of the stimulus plan, and they put cameras all over downtown. You know, one-time grant. But the catch was, the city now had to put it in HPD's budget after the grant ran out to start watching it. It's cameras at Minute Maid Park around downtown because they're watching us. I don't know if they're catching anybody, but they're watching.
Well, did they find the money to continue the monitoring?
Apparently, they had to lay off some people.
Well,
but, you know, we survived just fine without the monitoring. I don't know why they have to keep it up.
It just means fewer patrolmen on the streets.
Wow. Speaking of which, we had that major shift in the Sheriff's Department, what was it, 3-4 weeks ago, where they moved a lot of officers out of jail duty and out onto the streets and hired some, and we are training some security guards to
What Garcia did was replace a lot of the deputies that were doing jail duty with civilian employees and put the certified peace officer deputies out on patrol.
We like that, right? We don't like that?
I'm not sure.
Well, I'd rather have more policemen on the road than I would in the jails.
Well, I'm not sure.
Because in the jail, they have a tendency to beat the heck out of people. Whereas the civilian people, you know,
they do
less
still
likely.
sell them drugs too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the problem, you know, I don't think that any time the state assumes control over the life of anyone, and that's a kid in a state school, that's someone in a hospital, that's someone in a maximum security prison, anytime the state assumes responsibility for that person's life, I don't think they should be allowed to shove that responsibility off on a privatized organization. I don't think they should be allowed to cut corners on it. I think it should be totally open and accountable.
Is it a private organization or is it just are they county employees?
Now, what I want to know there is what kind of training and supervision do they have? Because accountability also comes through supervision. I also want to know what the public access is. Can I pull the records on these civilian guards the way I can on a peace officer?
I would imagine so.
You would imagine so, but do either of us know that?
No, because every time I do an open records request to the city of Houston, I have to sue them.
Well,
so does anyone else.
3 or 4 years ago, when the jail overcrowding was so
bad,
I contacted, I can't think of the gentleman's name now, but the head of the jail, Harris County Jail, wanted to schedule a tour. I wanted to go in and report on it for my radio shows. And at first they said, okay, let me talk to the boss, we'll make arrangements to get it done. It took about 2 weeks until finally the guy says, we've now determined we're no longer going to allow anybody to tour the jail.
So that was you who stopped that.
I guess it was. But, I mean, they know what I'm going to report. You know, that's like most of these politicians, officials, refuse to come on my radio shows because I'm not going to hold their feet to the fire. I'm going to start a fire with their feet. You know, I mean, and the fact of the matter is there's no justification for this drug war. It's a pipe dream, and these politicians live within that dream and don't want anybody to wake them up.
Look, you know, I've always believed that if they spend as much time on, if they spend half as much money on treatment as they did on
incarceration,
then I don't think you would have near the problem. I mean, I'm not a liberal.
Why not be really radical about this? Why not just leave adults alone to do what they want to do?
Well, you know, then
most of them don't even need treatment.
Well, then aren't you going to have companies and people coming in and taking advantage of that addiction?
What addiction?
Well, you know I'm addicted to sugar. I'm addicted to carbohydrates.
We're not throwing you in jail or forcing you into medical care, are we?
Well, that's because there's so many people who are addicted.
Now,
I mean, you know, they make us wear seatbelts. Why? Why? They make us wear seatbelts because they don't want to pay the hospital bill.
Saves money.
Saves money. Eventually, it's going to get where they're going to outlaw you and me.
No one makes me go into treatment for my addiction.
Which is the biggest killer of them all. Yeah.
And
don't hold your breath.
Most people who used drugs, and I'm including here all drugs, from heroin and cocaine and methamphetamine and alcohol and tobacco, all the way down through marijuana. Most of the people who use drugs are not addicted. Most of them are not habitual users. Most of them have absolutely no trouble springing from their use. Why do we want to mess with those people at all? We have a phone call.
Oh, good. Caller, you're on the air.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
I'm calling. I don't want to give my name, but I have a problem. What happened about in 2003? I think it was. I was my son got involved with this music thing. He's not a gangster person, but it took us to the music industry. So, in doing so, we fell on hardship. So I had to move into a place that was drug infested and drug users. Well, I'm not. Okay.
Yeah.
So I couldn't have no peace, no privacy, no nothing, because they come in the house when they get ready with the keys, do what they want to do, whatever, and just trying to make it real, real miserable for me. So in the end, they sent this girl in there. A bunch of deaths and stuff was going on in our family, and so I had a lot of things going on. And then this girl came in. I don't know if she must have thought I wasn't home, because they come in. They've been coming in there when I leave. And so this girl, this young lady that just got out of prison of 9 years, that's related to the management company, small complex in Third Ward. And she, on her own volition, I'm reading about, and she sit there with me for the longest and listen to me read about it, whatever. And in the end, I tried to call management and everybody tried to ask, who is this lady? Y'all, everybody said, well, why is she coming in here? And what's going on, whatever, but everybody was closed. Nobody wouldn't answer the phone. So finally, staying in there about 3, 4, 5 hours, this girl, a lady, the management came, so I asked her, oh, that's my daughter. She said that was her daughter-in-law sister. So they called a police officer that was drunk. He was a black man, he was drunk.
Oh, man.
He didn't handcuff me, he didn't do anything, and they said that I don't even know what I went to jail for. They was trying to, I know I got some kind of assault I had to do. I did everything they told me. I'm disabled. I was disabled then. Community service, anger management, I don't really know what.
Okay.
What was
going to bring me before a jury?
What did they arrest you for?
What did they arrest you for, ma'am?
I don't know.
Okay, this
I know.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I don't know this one. I don't know. I don't know. I know what they say. Assault and.
Yeah.
In your own home.
In my own home, sir.
Yes.
Property.
Well, this brings to mind. There are stories very similar to that. Thank you for your call.
Well, I'm thinking on one that happened at the very far end of the economic and educational ladder. A Harvard Law School professor returned home from
years ago?
No, this was about 3 years ago, 2 years ago. Returned home from a trip. He knew he was having trouble with his door lock. His friend took him to his house. They stood there, they juggled with the door, they worked with it. I think they finally went in through a window. He was black, most of the neighborhood was white. Someone called the police. He finally got in the house. Police came to the door and yelled. He answered the door. The police came inside. He identified himself, showing that he lived there. His friend was with him, also identified him. And the police arrested him for assault and resisting arrest, drug him out of his house, took him down to the police station. And of course, where the two stories diverge is when this happens to a Harvard Law School professor. He doesn't stay at that police station more than about 30 minutes.
There was a story.
But that one ended up with the police officer and the arrestee getting invited to the White House to talk it over with the president over a beer. But this woman, I think, is a perfect example of the way that the average citizen is, practically speaking, without resources or remedy when the legal establishment gets out of hand and does not operate under the strictest of controls.
Well, what about the Bel Air cop who went and shot the kid coming back from Jack in the Box with the curly fries?
Yeah, just because the cop
in his own yard
keyed in the license plate number wrong. Yeah.
But you know what? He still lost control of the situation because there was no gun.
Yeah.
There was no gun whatsoever. There were two cops there. There was a woman and a kid on the ground. They lost control of the situation. Of course, they got her not guilty, but they lost control of the situation. It's very sad.
There was a situation perhaps similar to this lady's story. 2-3 weeks ago, a gentleman had one of those health monitors that alerts the authorities if he's having a health condition.
White Plains, New York.
Yeah, White Plains, New York, and the monitor went off with no reason. It somehow went off, and the police show up, and he's trying to explain to them it was just a faulty monitor or whatever, and the gentleman wound up getting killed in his own home because because of an altercation over.
The police tried to drag him out of his house.
Yeah.
Yeah. It happens all too often.
The only thing I think I can really say, and I have to give lots of warnings and conditions on this. You have a right to make a video recording of anything that happens around you or that you see, so long as you do not physically interfere with the person involved.
Now let me ask you.
If you're going to be going around town, if you're going to be partying, make sure you have at least one friend with you and that everybody has some means of making a video of whatever happens.
What if there's a cop there and you're videoing the cop?
That's perfectly within your right. Keep your distance. Don't physically interfere with him.
If the cop sees it, can he take it?
No.
Not legally.
Not legally.
But it's evidence.
If it's evidence, then he can get a warrant.
Yeah, but no. I think Buford's talking about a crime has occurred, police are gathering.
No, I'm not saying even then. I'm saying if you get stopped by the side of the road for a traffic ticket.
Okay.
There's nothing to keep you from videotaping that whole scene.
Other than a cop telling you not to.
He doesn't have the right to tell you that.
But they do.
That's right. Make sure that that's on the tape, too.
Well, you know, one of the things that I've advised some of my clients in some of the minority neighborhoods is that if you're being pulled over and you're not doing anything wrong, and if a cop gets aggressive with you, you can always dial 911 and ask for a supervisor. Don't ask the cop to send you a supervisor.
No.
Dial 911 because that message has been recorded. Because you see, years back, we had a police officer come to our office and tried to collect a debt that she said we owed someone. And we called 911 for a sergeant to come. And that stopped everything.
Well, you know, across the country, most police agencies now have dashboard cams in their cruisers. So anytime the policeman turns on his bubble machine, the camera records whatever's in front of his car. The technology's to the stage now where we could clip a little camera on the shoulder strap of every policeman, put a little bitty Wi-Fi box on his utility belt, put the recorder in his car, and every minute a police officer is on duty should be recorded by that camera in a recorder he cannot get to and subject to subpoena or discovery if it becomes relevant to any case.
And how many people, the towns are not going to spring for those kind of expenses, especially when it can hold one of their police officers.
It only takes one multi-million-dollar civil rights lawsuit to make that kind of installation cheap.
They could always just get the money from the forfeiture, drug forfeiture.
Yeah, but they're not going to spend it for that.
No, Don Johnson's got to drive his Ferrari around Miami.
Yeah.
Who's the sheriff around here that for years used the forfeiture money to throw the really, really, really big barbecue and beer bust for his officers?
Would that be Clevenhagen?
Might have been. I don't remember. Right. Yeah. But
well, there was just a 16-year-old girl that called 911. They took a long time to answer, and she had an word that she said, hung up, dialed it again, and it took them a long time to answer. She hung up again, and she called a third time, and before the officer would say anything, first thing out of his mouth was, "Are you the foul-mouthed little girl that's been calling here?" Her father is dying on the kitchen floor. It takes 8 minutes for them to send somebody out in response to it, and they send a policeman, and she gets arrested.
Years ago, when I first started teaching, I taught a course called Remedies, and we had to cover criminal contempt cases. And that included all of the ones where the courts very patiently explained to the police and to the lower courts that it was not unlawful to call a policeman an MFer. It was not illegal to tell the judge that he was CS. You know,
CS.
That cop is trained to listen to that F-bomb, treat it like a normal word, and do his damn job.
I was always told that's your 2 cents worth of constitutional rights.
Well, just because it's legal doesn't mean a cop's going to like it, or
he doesn't have to like it, but he does have to put up with it.
Supposedly.
You put up with it, and if he gets his hands on you, he'll just be a little bit more rough than he was with somebody else.
He should not be putting his hands on you. That's why I'm saying let's videotape every second of his time on duty.
I like that idea. I think it would serve the nation well, actually.
May I use these cameras?
Well, yes, you can use those cameras. I will not be getting signatures to oppose that.
Okay.
Although, you know, I do tell my clients here in Harris County in Houston that make sure when the police officer stops you, try not to make it a memorable event for the police officer. Make sure that they don't remember you.
Yeah.
I just recently read a brand new book about a flagrant event. It's a story, the story of the Lawrence versus Texas case, the one where the Supreme Court set aside the Texas Homosexual Conduct Act. And it was very clearly from the outset a case of sheriff's officers acting on their own and exceeding what they should have been doing from the very beginning. So, yeah, that what it turned out was so far over the line.
Isn't that the one that Chuck Rosenthal argued in the U.S. Supreme Court?
No, it's the one that Chuck Rosenthal tried to argue in the Supreme Court.
You know, we had heard, and you can tell me, but we had heard that the whole thing was staged. I mean, not staged, but it was set up because they wanted to challenge the law.
No, and this
we even heard the officers were in on it. Is that not true?
No, the guys involved, there's no way they could have staged this.
Because I could tell you, if I'm an officer,
what happened?
I'm never going to arrest two consenting adults doing something.
Everything everyone said. But there were 3 guys involved, and the first one made the cops mad before they ever got there. He was drunk and was boyfriends of one of the other 2 men involved. And when he got kicked out of the apartment, he called the cops and said, there's a drunk black guy in there with a gun.
That'll do it.
The cops showed up. They went in the apartment, and it turns out that the two men probably were not having sex at all. It just showed up that way in the police report. Now, it turned out that one of them talked to an activist in the local gay community early the next morning, and that started the wheels rolling, and before he even got to the trial stage as a Class C misdemeanor, Lambda, ACLU, and the whole bunch of them were structuring it the right way to take it to the Supreme Court.
Well, it had to start in the JP court because it was a Class C.
Yeah.
I believe that Chuck Rosenthal helped. Let me tell you why. Because if I would have been the DA, and I would have believed in the legality of the sodomy law, even though if you look at it without expressing opinion on personal beliefs, it does seem to be unconstitutional because you can't have one person make it illegal for one person to do it and another person can't. You can't treat two people differently. So Chuck had to realize that. Chuck's DA at the JP court, if he was trying to uphold the law, should have dismissed it. If he'd have dismissed it, then it wouldn't have went up. And they dismiss a lot of cases in JP courts.
But the thing is, the Lambda guys had already gotten involved.
But so what?
They went to the judge and agreed to a no contest, made sure the fine was high enough for them to appeal it.
But don't you hear what I'm saying? Chuck was involved. He let it go.
Chuck's method management style was such that he didn't even know what was going on.
See, I don't believe that.
Until it was in the Court of Appeals.
See, I don't believe that. Because we knew it was in the county. Chuck's DA on the ground would have known. I think Chuck was in it all the way. I think he was helping Lambda.
Well, we've about run out of time again. It has been a delightful chat. We've gone down some different paths tonight. But I hope we've given you some ideas and some thoughts, and I'm sure that if you keep listening to these two characters, you'll hear some more about some petitions to get the city to do something. Richard Lee has a website where he's got a petition. I believe it's on change.org, isn't it?
Change.org, you should search for legalized medical marijuana.
Yeah, where he's getting signatures on his nationwide petition. So see what you can do there. Maybe in 2 weeks when we come back, my voice will get over this allergy thing that we've got. We've got 1 minute left. Last thoughts from any of you?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Glad you came over. And the drug war, I predict, will be over in November. As soon as we have 2 states that will legalize all these other countries that are holding off because we're doing interdiction, they'll lose them.
And if you'd like to hear the interview I did with Richard Lee, please go to drugtruth.net. Check out the most recent Cultural Baggage show.
And it was a good program.
Yeah, a lot of great info there. And you can even hear from Stan First saying that Jesus didn't smoke any doobies.
And I don't know what that has to do with anything, but it's something to think about, and come back to Drug Truth and Politics later. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
I tried to liven it up a little bit.
Oh, that's good.
Good.
I like it.
We have these private prisons that have now hired lobbyists to go get minimum mandatories in you.
I began to understand that the 17 or the 19-year-old kid I had in the backseat of my police car was not a criminal at all.
Remove the profit motive. If you remove the profit motive, you can do away with almost all these problems. And how do you do that? Simple. You end prohibition, which can only mean one thing. Legalize drugs. Legalize all drugs.
If we really want to improve our urban neighborhoods, the most important thing that we could do, the single most important thing that we could do, is end the war on drugs.
we have these private prisons that have now hired lobbyists to go get minimum mandatories and
I began to understand that the 17 or the 19-year-old kid I had in the backseat of my police car was not a criminal at all.
We moved the property